Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibration Radio. I'm your host, Reverend Raven, and tonight we have an amazing guest that's been on the show in the past, and not recently, a couple of months ago, had a download back in October that's going to share the message with us. And we ask you to participate and ask as many questions you want. Remember, you can type in those comments and ask your questions, and we will be glad to answer them for you to the best that we can. And also, before we start tonight's show, I just want to give a shout out. And a remembrance actually to a fellow time banker, Mr. Khan, that passed away, and we know that he's over on the other side. So he's given us so much to think about, and we just want to Edgar Khan, let him know that you're always in our hearts. So just a shout out to his wife and let her know that we love and think about her all the time. So all right, without further ado, I welcome our guest, Tom Coates. Hi, Tom.
How are you? Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. So, welcome back, and tell us about your download that you had back in October. I'm excited to hear this.
All right, well, let me say before we get into that, I may appear a little flat tonight. I may grimace a little bit because a week ago today, I had a fall and I broke my right arm at the top of the humerus bone, just below the shoulder, in three places, including the ball that connects with the shoulder joint. So it's been a challenging few days, and they tell me that in a month or so I'll feel just fine. But right now, it's a little bit. I'm a little bit stressed over that. Now, what I'm here to talk about is what I would call an expanded framework. I've talked about this in a couple of venues over the last couple of. Let me turn my phone off here so it won't ring while I'm talking. In a couple of venues, and it was in a one I spoke about last weekend. It was titled "Beyond All That Is," which is probably literally as descriptive as it can be. This is a framework that does go beyond what we think of as all that is, and the background on it is that I have worked for many years. Well, I'll start a little earlier than that. I've been in my own life in connection with various non-physical intelligences, if you will, since I was a child. When I was a kid, I would get guidance through voices in my head. When I was a teenager, I was introduced formally, in a formal sense, to entities that refer to themselves as my spirit guides, and in the first of many out-of-body experiences in another realm outside of time and space, and I've had those kinds of experiences substantially all my life, and so and I have worked over the years, over several decades, with a number of different channels who, on a regular basis, channel various entities. Most channels will be will have a particular entity or intelligence that they connect with, and I've worked with one in particular on a weekly basis for the last 16 plus years. I've worked with others on a sporadic basis over many years, longer than that, and in more recent years, there have been a couple I've worked with on a non-regular basis, but quite frequently. So, in addition to my own connections with spirit, I've try to work with others who were more attuned to just tuning in all the time than I am. And so all my life I've had that kind of connection, and all my life I have been what one might refer to as a seeker. And notwithstanding that I've had a career which continues as a lawyer, it's my day job. I've had this other aspect that has kept me interested in things on a different plane. And so, any questions about that?
Well, I have a question, Tom, because growing up and having that ability to communicate with spirit on the other side, or being able to channel entities, did you feel out of place at all in society? I mean, I just got to put that out there real quick.
Well, I didn't feel so much out of place because it was not something I shared with others. I was smart enough to keep it to myself, if you will. But also, I mean, I'll give you an example. I was when I was 3 years old, I had experienced a precognitive experience where I was running a rubber John Deere toy tractor up and down my father's body one evening while he was reading probably a Mickey Spillane detective novel or something. And as I was doing it, I started seeing what looked like a sort of a movie, and so I started looking at that and removed the tractor, and it went away. So I put the tractor back; it came back. I realized at that point there was some sort of linkage between running the tractor on my father's body and the content of what I was seeing, and so I held the tractor there and was running it and watching this movie. And what it was a movie of my parents' marriage disintegrating 10 years down the road. And
Wow.
And it turned out to be quite accurate, and it also foretold of the severe emotional distress that would be suffered by the participants, especially my mother, who was the precipitating cause of the breakup, and that and by my father as well, and by my younger brother, but that I would not suffer nearly the degree of distress that they would. And I asked, I was getting this in the form of vocal guidance in my head, and I asked, why would it be that they would have this and I would not? And the answer was that, well, you know in ways that they do not know that who you are is not dependent upon the family unit being kept together. That your identity is independent of that. And so, and that's exactly how it unfolded 10 years later. And I asked then, well, should I share this with my parents? And the answer was a very definitive no. I asked why, and the answer was they're not old enough to know. Now that was, of course, language fitting my 3-year-old age. Well, I understood that meant that they didn't have a framework in which to positively interpret it.
Right. Well, I've known you for a few years now, and I do know that your brain is much way out there than most people that I know, like your intelligence. And so you telling me a story about a 3-year-old getting a message about a divorce that's going to happen 10 years later doesn't surprise me with you.
And I didn't even know the word divorce. It was not part of my vocabulary at age 3, and so all I saw was that the family was separating, coming apart, and so I carry that around with me, and so it was as a result of it. I was a 3-year-old keeping secrets from my parents, which is somewhat unusual, but that's the way it was, and probably the best way for it to be. in that
It
situation.
still blows my mind to this day that you went around calling your friends' parents by their first name. Like that just blows my mind because that just, I was taught that's disrespectful, but you connected with them on that level and were able to communicate with them on their level.
Yeah, and my father was a doctor. I called him by his first name, and I called my mother by her first name, and many of their friends were many of my father's friends were doctors as well, and I called them all by their first name. So,
I mean, that's really, and you grew up in the South?
in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, that was totally unheard of in the South.
Well, it was not the norm. Let's put it that way.
Guess so.
But I became, it was really interesting because I did become friends with the parents of my friends in ways that would not have been able to occur if that degree of familiarity had not been made part of the relationship. And then when I became an adult and became a lawyer, many of those same people became clients, because they thought of me as a friend more than just the friend
Right.
of their child,
Right.
So
Wow.
there's a sort of interesting dynamic there. And,
So when you were channeling at such a young age and everything like that, did spirit help you with like with your studies and help you keep in mind like that too? I'm just curious, just what it was like to have that kind of onset with spirit at that time. Like were they helping you out too with your little pathway? Were you listening to them to know what path to follow?
I would say they helped me. I don't know. I don't know the extent. I know that when I was having trouble with when I was away at boarding school at age 15, 16, and I was having trouble with some math issues and so forth, I would sometimes awaken in the night and find that I had been reading the math book in my sleep. I would literally awaken and I would find the light was on in my room. The math book was in my hand, and what would awaken me up, what would have awakened me from sleeping to waking would be the sound of my own voice reading the math book.
Wow.
In my sleep.
Wow.
And I have to think that spirit may have had something to do with that. I don't know.
That is incredible. That is incredible.
I had an experience in college, my freshman year in college, where I was taking a basic chemistry course, and I was at the time I was a triple major of pre-med, history, and philosophy, and much to the chagrin of my faculty advisor, and I was really not well prepared at all for the pre-med science courses that were required, and so and I was just completely at sea with chemistry 101 or whatever it was called, and so at the end of I was going to just give up the whole thing at the end of that year, but I got to the exam and it was about 150 multiple choice questions, and I scanned it very quickly in the first 10 or 15 minutes and could not find a single question that I was sure of the answer to. I found one about halfway through that I thought maybe I had a 60% chance of knowing the answer.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only one I could find that I had any confidence in at all. So I answered that one according to whatever my instinct was, and then without reading any of the other questions, went up and down the pages, darkening in, the choices 1 through 5 or whatever they were, in a pattern that looked like a reasonably random pattern that a professor might choose.
Wow.
And fully expected to get, you know, a big fat F on the exam.
Right.
And when the grades were posted, it ended up, I was out of there within 20 minutes. It was a 5-hour exam. And some of my friends who knew my state of distress said, well, see, you're giving up, sorry, you know, and all that. And I got a C plus.
Wow.
So I always thought spirit might have had something to do with that too, to give me 2 more years of torture in chemistry that I didn't have any way of doing well at.
So then eventually we just changed to you know, being a lawyer and going to school for that.
Exactly.
Yep.
I did in a chemistry lab day one time. My sophomore, junior, it was organic chemistry that really ended my career as a pre-med student. But my sophomore year, at some point, I had in a lab in quantitative analysis. I was doing something in a test tube and putting it in a centrifuge and so forth, and I don't remember how the experiment went, but at some point in there, I had a sudden download, an insight that, wow, what's in this test tube could be all of creation. And, you know, our creator could be just a fumbling, ignorant college sophomore out there trying to figure out how to get through his chemistry. And I have, and it could be that once the afternoon lab session is over, that everything in the contents will be poured out in the sink, and that'll be end of this universe, you know.
Right.
and through various channeling sources, I've gotten feedback on that's about as good as it gets in terms of figuring out how things work.
Oh my goodness. And so you got through college, you got into your career, and you decided to keep channeling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or it was before, when you were younger, it seems like that your father was more of a conduit or an antenna for you to communicate the spirit.
Well, not so much. I mean, he was not these things were foreign to him. Just like my father was a psychiatrist, he and I were very close, but he was not into or he was frightened by things that were beyond the physical, and so it was not something that he was comfortable exploring, even in a theoretical way. He and I would talk about things, but it was it made him nervous. My mother had lots of mental distress and so forth, was treated for schizophrenia throughout her adult life. And probably if she were in the treatment pool today, she'd be rated more as a severe borderline personality disorder than schizophrenia. But either one has some significant distortion in perspective, and she did the best she could with what she had, but neither one. It was not a household in which this kind of experience could have been shared without there being an immediate conclusion that I was having some sort of psychotic break, and I was always very clear in my own mind that was not what was going on for me, that this was just an expansion of consciousness to a degree that they were not familiar with. In other words, in the context of tonight's discussion, for which they did not have a framework other than mental illness. And I didn't think that was an appropriate one for my experiences.
So, over the years, would you say that you got like monthly downloads, daily downloads? What was it for? Did you have to be a certain energy level at the time to get a download? Did they just come out automatically?
No, well, sometimes they would come up automatically, and sometimes they would just, and sometimes I would reach out. The uh, I was introduced to my first wife through this kind of intervention, if you will, and I was at a I was at a I was at a debutante party, and the new crop of debutantes was being introduced, and I was with a young lady that I was sort of semi-engaged to at the time, and we were very very fond of each other and so forth, and and I would look up when the new debutante when they were announcing the girls were being paraded out by their fathers and so forth, and if there was one announced that I didn't know by name, I would look up and see what she looked like. And there was one that came along in that category. I looked up, and she was kind of cute. So,
Mm-hmm.
but not cute enough to not to look to hold my attention, but for a second or two. And so I looked away, and all of a sudden, the voice of my guides came in like gangbusters, saying, "She's the mother of your children. You should pay more attention."
Oh my gosh.
So I said, "Oh, oh wow!" And it was so loud. I was sure that my date must have heard it, and the other couple we were with, but I checked and they did not. And so I sort of spoke back in my head. Well, does that mean we're supposed to get married? And 'cause I didn't have framework for a mother of my children. Were they getting married? And she said, or the voices said, "That's a choice for you to make. But however you choose, she's still the mother of your children."
Wow.
So I thought, okay, and that's how my first wife and I became acquainted.
Oh my gosh. You could have actually married the girl you were there with and had a fling with
That's
the
right.
one.
Well, we became engaged, and then I became engaged to somebody else, and then
Yeah.
after that one broke up, I said, "Okay, guys, tell me what I'm supposed to do now." And they said, "Now it's time to go fulfill your destiny with the mother of your children." I said,
Right.
"Okay, okay, hit me over the head with a 2x4 once more, and I'll do it."
And you have I met your daughter. She's very nice. Very nice young lady.
Well, thank you. I've got two daughters, and they're both very very wonderful young ladies. I have to say.
Yes, you very nice family. So tell me about the download you had in October. I've been dying to know this for a
Okay.
while.
All right.
So
Well, now I've been talking about frameworks, and
okay.
so that's the important aspect here. This is, as I said, we work within frameworks all over the place. With all kinds of terms for that. A fancy term for it is paradigm, and that's a framework. It's a context. It's like the difference between figure and ground in a photograph. Figure is what you focus on. Ground is what's behind it, and that's the framework within which the figure appears. And so, um, I want to emphasize that because frameworks are important structures of consciousness for us to be able to grasp things. If we if we don't have a framework for a particular concept, then we have a very hard time connecting with it in any meaningful way. I'll give you a bit of an example about that. My dad, who you've known from past discussions, had a nickname of Billy, which is what I called him by. Billy and I, when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, would almost every night, unless it was snowing or just too unpleasant weather-wise, we'd go outside and look at the stars for a few minutes before bedtime, and and I would often tell him with something that was real to me that he didn't have a framework for. And I would point up there and say, I have other homes up there. And and often I say, actually, I have more than one. And to me, that was real. Um, to him, it was scary because he had no framework for that whatsoever. And and so I had a framework for it, but he did not. And does that make sense to you?
It does. And I think in everybody's life, that things come in steps that we can understand them. So I get what you're saying. Yes.
All that did was it gave me pleasure to share that with him, and it was real for me. But all it did was make him nervous because he had no framework for it. All of our structures of consciousness are frameworks of one kind or another, um, and they're all essentially evolutionary in character. Um, our, uh, our religious beliefs are frameworks. They're structures of consciousness, and you can call them generically. A religion is a mythic membership belief system that's shared by a group. And what religion does as a as a as a framework is to allow tribal groups to expand beyond their natural limitations from a biological perspective. Humans, like orangutans, can band together based on an alpha male being physically powerful enough to control the group, up to about 80 members. It's believed, and then once they expand beyond that number, they start to splinter off into smaller groups, and because the biological uh, aspects by themselves are not sufficiently powerful to hold them together in larger numbers, and uh, and so religion evolved as a structure of consciousness that allowed for lateral expansion of groups beyond the limitations of mere tribal bands, and and so and for that reason, religion in its uh, 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 most common practice is still anchored in lower level tribal consciousness, a lower mid level, or in what in Michael terms would be referred to as baby soul consciousness at the most fundamental levels of baby soul consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So most people who are involved with fundamentalist religions, well, it doesn't matter what flavor it is. It could be Christian, it could be Muslim, it could be any other thing. Could be Mormon, it could be Hinduism or Buddhism for that matter. Um, they're going to be in the more or less the tribal uh, uh, bandwidth, or the what Michael would refer to as baby soul evolutionary state at the soul level, and so that's a framework, uh, and that but that did enable people to band together in much larger numbers, and the next significant consciousness structure or framework, if you will, which evolved after that, was what has been referred to since the time of Freud as the ego, and that is that because tribal consciousness at its most fundamental levels is a group consciousness. It is not rational, and it's not egoic. It's pre rational and pre egoic, um, and it's hard for us to imagine that because it seems like basic human nature to us, but it's really it's part of human nature in our society, but in other earlier iterations of society, it was not there for them, and so the egoic consciousness is what enables people to evolve their individualism, if you will.
Right.
And again, it's not the end all and be all of anything. It's just an evolutionary structure of consciousness, and or in the frame in the language of tonight, a framework for of experience. So it enables expanded experience that would not otherwise be available. And all these structures and all these frameworks are ones which carry, they're sort of two-edged swords. They both an expanded framework will be great because it will let you do all kinds of things you couldn't do before you got to it.
Right.
But it also, when you come to the end of it, it will hinder you from moving on to the next thing. And we hear that echoed all over the place in the consciousness community today about the ego is so bad, the ego is the bogeyman of all things and all that. And in fact, the ego does impair our ability to have transcendent experiences because the ego wants to go along and take credit for all that. But in fact, it is just a structure to be transcended like all the others. But every structure you create will be the big thing of today will be the impediment to the next big thing that comes along. Let's put it that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
I mean, beliefs. That concept of beliefs is something we should talk about generally about in this context too, because beliefs themselves are consciousness structures that we use to assess information and so forth. And I perhaps for better or worse, from the time I was probably about 11 years old, I had come to the realization that everything that I had been taught and had maybe developed some belief system that was probably totally wrong, and that I wanted to try to let go of all that, and I found it's really not that easy to do, but because even if we let go of all the beliefs we have today, by tomorrow we will have created a few more, because beliefs are just are a structure by which we are constantly gauging information. Beliefs can enable us to do things, and they also can prevent us from doing things. And more often than not, if they're beliefs we hold on to and invest emotional energy in, they will be things that impede rather than enhance our abilities and our development and our evolution. Because beliefs themselves are frameworks by which we experience reality. And so more often than not, the beliefs are designed to limit our experience rather than to expand our experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does. And what's one thing that we can do to help that though? I mean, I always heard that you need to have a belief to make it into this world, but in essence, you really don't need a belief because that hinders us too, right?
Well, yeah, it's sort of like walking a tightrope,
Right?
and if you go too far, I mean, like I imagine in my mind that the acrobat or whatever who strung a line between the twin towers back when they existed, and walked the tightrope from
Yeah.
one of the towers to the other. And obviously, if you swing either way too far, you're going to fall off, and that'll be the end of your big feat. And so using beliefs to our advantage is good, but we always have to be careful and on the alert, because anything we believe, a belief is by definition an idea we have about something which we do not have knowledge about. And so the more we can develop a sense of knowing rather than a sense of believing, the better off we are. And so, I mean, I've had many, and I've talked about some on this broadcast of yours.
Mm-hmm.
I've had many experiences that were, by some measure, quite miraculous. And frankly, I feel that I have been blessed from the day that I was born into this life. And one of the reasons for that has been that I have had been lucky enough to have had sort of a sense of deep knowing from the time I was born about how things work, and have been, and that has given me a sense of acceptance about how things work, and not a sense of disappointment about or desire that things should be other than they are, if you will. But when you try to fit the world in some sort of an artificial belief system, like our religions would have us do, and sometimes our culture would have us do, then things don't work. And you see in this more and more in our social sphere with issues that had come up about people's gender orientation, and if you look at these poor folks who have been subjected to who are gay by nature and have been subjected to being treated or sent to schools to try to make them something, make them into something they're truly not, and all that sort of thing. This has had distorted things can get due to belief systems, when the belief is that, gee, if you're this way, you're not one of God's real children, and that sort of thing.
Right. It's almost like there's an illusion going on here about the different male and female and gender identity and all that stuff. Like, we've been living an illusion all this time.
No question about it. No
right?
question about it. That's right. Yeah. And so and part of my good fortune, if you will, was to from an early age to be more awake than a lot of people. It's good fortune. It's something that at the soul level, apparently I chose for this lifetime. And so and I've had many experiences of other lifetimes and connections with those lifetimes. But the and I've seen all those lifetimes as part of a sort of a patchwork quilt, and they all have influence on me, and likewise I have influence on all of them. It doesn't matter when in chronological time they may have happened at the level of soul and so forth. They're all happening simultaneously. So the limitations we impose through our belief systems are simply totally artificial and really don't have any bearing in reality beyond the artificial systems that are created for them.
So the framework of getting to the point towards the download that you had in October,
right?
So everything up into your life came to this one very point that occurred to you in October.
Yeah, I'll start getting into that now. In the last couple of years, I've been I've worked with a couple of other fellows in some pretty significant channeling work and so forth. I've been given permission recently to name one of them anyway. His name is Tom Ariel. Tom was a fellow who was a corporate guy with Capital One, which we're all familiar with. What's in your wallet, Capital One. He had a career there for 25 or more years, and then and then got to be about 50 years old, and something went haywire, and his spirit kicked in, and he ended up leaving his job, and all of a sudden he was spontaneously channeling all sorts of different groups from the Pleiades and so forth, and at some point in late 2015, he was directed to come to a talk that I was giving for the Richmond Ions group, which at that time, which involved, interestingly enough, the the journeys of the channel, the information I'd gotten from channeling about the three different 5+ year journeys of Jesus to the Western Hemisphere, both to North and South America, between 55 AD and 90 AD, which is not something you'll find in your canonical New Testament.
Right.
And so, anyway, he came to this talk I gave, and in which I laid out when they occurred, where they, what each one involved in terms of the place where they sailed from, place where they landed, what they did on the journey, and so forth, and then came up afterwards and introduced himself and said, well, I was guided to by some Pleiadian sources to come to you to help me get grounded. And I said, oh, did you ask them why they were referring you to me? And he said, well, yeah, I did. And he says, they told me you were one of them. So I said, well, it sounds like a legitimate basis for sending you to me. So we can get to work. And so we've been friends ever since. And over the course of that last 5 years, I would say he's become, by any measure, a world-class channel. And unlike most channels who will bring in, Bashar or bring in Abraham or bring in whomever,
Seth.
Yeah, Seth or Council of One or Michael or whatever.
Right.
My friend Tom can literally bring in just about anybody you want, and including deceased loved ones and everything beyond that. And so
I totally would ask him for Elvis Presley, because I see him in the tabloids everywhere. Like, how's he doing that?
Well, I don't know. I've never asked for Elvis, but I'm sure we could get that if we did.
we definitely we got to get Elvis on here.
Yeah, that would be. I guess we could do that. And so anyway, when I was a teenager, I used to be able to curl my lip like Elvis. I spent a lot of time practicing that. So but that's when I used to have hair on top of my head too, and sideburns. But
oh my goodness!
But anyway, we've done all kinds of wonderful stuff and over the years, and he's brought in groups like Abraham and of which he is actually, his consciousness is actually a part of the Abraham consciousness.
Nice.
And to give you an example of the variety of it, a couple of years ago, he called me one Sunday afternoon in the office. I was in my office, and he says, "I'm calling you because something is coming through that wants to have a conversation with you." And I said, "All right, okay, I'll take a break here and let's put them on." And he said, and then I heard him say in the background, "Oh, this can't be right. I'm not believing this." And I said, "What's going on?" He says, "Well, they're telling me it's Buddha that wants to talk to you. and so I said, well, okay, put them on, put them through. And so for the next half hour plus, I had this absolutely wonderful conversation with an entity that identified itself as Buddha. And as far as I could tell, having studied a fair amount about Buddha and having co-founded 38 years ago a Buddhist Sangha that is still thriving today, it bore all the earmarks of a legitimate Buddha experience, and so I was quite grateful. That was the first time, but not the last time Buddha has come through. And
what did Buddha say exactly?
I made some detailed notes of it. I don't have them with me, but mainly it was to encourage me and us to continue what we're doing and to create a new model for humanity. That was the gist of it, and that's been in the spirit of what's come through since then.
Right.
So,
yeah, humanity needs help right now.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's why we're here,
Right.
So anyway, in the past, we followed this through, and it's been going on now for all this time, and one night, for instance, in 2019, he was over with a woman friend I had not previously met, and as they were leaving, they had dinner at my house. It was a Monday or Tuesday night, and they were getting up to leave around 10 o'clock, and we were just sitting in the kitchen, and then they got up, and he says, as they were leaving, he says, how about telling her about the story about your lifetime as a Jewish orphan in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. And so I started, and I said, well, okay. And so I started telling the story, and I think I've discussed that with you in the past, and the story ends at Auschwitz, and what turned out to be the pinnacle of that lifetime when this 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy who has been an orphan since birth realized upon leaving his body in the gas chamber that everyone was being killed, and that the people around him did not know they were dying, and that not only that, but as soon as he left his body, he realized that the gas chamber was literally just jam-packed with souls of others who did not know they had died.
And they were stuck.
Who were in denial and stuck there as ghosts.
Wow.
And so what became the high point of that young lifetime was the rescue of all those souls from the gas chamber. And it was literally thousands of them. And it took several trips back and forth from what my friend Bob Monroe referred to as a reception center, which is more commonly known as heaven, to get all those souls out of that chamber. But I succeeded in doing that. And as I told the story, it's a very, if you tell the details, it's quite emotional. And all of a sudden, this pool of water appeared around us in my kitchen. It literally was about 8 feet by 10 feet, covering the floor and around our feet. But it was not on our shoes. It was not even under our shoes. But when you picked up your foot, it filled in where your shoes had been,
Wow.
And what we all got as a download was this was representative of tears of joy and gratitude from those souls who had been liberated from the gas chamber. And so in 1943, and so it's wonderful that these things can manifest in physical ways, that we can experience in physical ways. It took a whole roll of paper towels to get all the water off the floor, and a few nights later, I tried duplicating just covering the area, and it took a gallon to do that. It was pretty amazing. and the water that was there that night was different from tap water. It was the viscosity was much greater. It was thicker, and it had an organic sort of texture and taste to it as well. And so it was really interesting. And both of my friends were a little bit weirded out by the experience, but I thought it was just great.
I think it is too. What an amazing experience to have that. And what a blessing it was for you to be there as that 12-year-old, 11 and 12-year-old
Oh
soul
yeah.
that got to, experience that. But also because remember that gas chamber went on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a while, right?
Well, yeah,
And they
absolutely.
were stuck in there reliving it all the time.
Exactly. And then it being in, they were stuck in there not knowing they died. And so it was quite an honor to be chosen to be the person who liberated them. And what has come about more recently as a result of that, because those chambers were used by those who manipulated the Nazis, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
the off-world groups like reptilians and greys and so forth. They were used as energy uh, generators for negative energy,
Right.
And so one of the projects I have this sounds a little let's say quixotic, if you will, but one of the projects I've been involved in more recently has been to go back in time to 1945 when the war ended and the camps were liberated by the Russians from the east and by the Americans from the west, and to go in there at the time of the liberation when those gas chambers were chocked to the as far as they could be from the deaths of all the people who'd been killed there, and to liberate the energy from those chambers. Let's say in legal terms, nunc pro tunc, now for then, legal Latin terms, and so doing it as of 1945, not looking back and doing it now, but going back to 1945 and doing that as of late March, early April 1945, and uh, and so far the feedback I've gotten is that I've been able to resolve about half of the energy from those chambers as of that date,
Wow.
So if you wake up one day and 9/11 never happened, you'll know that this work succeeded.
Right. Nice.
I mean, what my point is that the energy that is generated from that kind of experience, the negative energy that's used as a generator,
Mm-hmm.
is the kind of things that feeds experiences like the occurrence of 9/11. And so I'm using 9/11 in jest, but nevertheless, to go back and rewrite the timeline back in 1945 could have significant positive impact on our life in 2022.
That would be amazing.
It's in effect creating a new framework.
Right.
And so that gets us into uh, the kind of work I've been doing this past year, and that has been, well, are you familiar with the law of one, the raw material?
I am.
Okay, and I would think that most of the listeners of your broadcast are as well. Um, for those who are not, the raw material is a set of channel teachings that came through between, I think it was something like July 1980 and sometime in 1984, to a group of three people in Kentucky named Don Elkins, Carla Rueckert, and Jim McCarty. Carla Rueckert was primarily the channel. Jim McCarty is also a channel. Don Elkins was not. Um, but they were very interested in extraterrestrial intelligences, and the Ra came through starting in the mid 1980, and the material they got was, I think, by most any person who's familiar with it measure, the most coherent, complete, elegant, and and believable cosmology that humanity's ever been given, of the whole spectrum of reality, and it's not inconsistent with a lot of others. But I mean, for instance, one teaching that I've spoken about on this podcast, Sandy, is the Michael teaching. Well, the Michael teachings are more personalized and so forth. They're not nearly as exotic,
Communicable.
if you will,
Yeah. Right.
a system as the law of one.
Right.
There also have been other cosmologies that have been downloaded over the years that have been come through. One that comes to mind in particular is the Billy Meyer material. Billy Meyer is a fellow in Switzerland who's been in touch with various Pleiadians since his childhood. Much of his information is valid. A fair amount of it, unfortunately, is not, because I guess he's been subject to his own egoic desire for 15 minutes of fame and so forth. But nevertheless, he's been given his own cosmology, and it is, the terms are not identical, but it is essentially a rehash of the law of one. It's another way of saying the law of one. And what I have been guided by, in terms of from other channel sources, is that what comes to us through the Ra group as the law of one, and also through the Pleiadians by way of Billy Meyer, is pretty much the gold standard of ontological cosmologies across the level of the more advanced consciousnesses of the Milky Way galaxy. So that, I would say, that speaks well of it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, to me, the law of one is basically an energy of love.
Right. And by
Right.
the way, I meant to mention, I don't know that I got around to doing it. I started the thought and never finished it. This talk was named Beyond All There Is recently, and my alternative title for the talk is It's Just a Big Love Story. That's all it is. So,
I love that.
and so we'll get into that at the end. But anyway, the law of one is a beautiful and symmetrical statement of how the Ra's experience of how things are. And to put it in put their framework in context, we are described by them as being in third density, and they describe these density levels, which are levels of consciousness or ranges of consciousness. Rocks would be in first density, and trees would be in second, and lower human survival consciousness would be in the high reaches of second, low reaches of third. But most of human history has been in third density consciousness on Earth, anyway, and we're moving to fourth. In fact, the Earth is now, according to my information, transitioned into fourth density consciousness, and so we're moving that way, and the Ra are in mid-level sixth density.
Right.
the difference between them and us is at mid-level 6, all polarities, all conflicts, all positives and negatives have been resolved, and so it's all one at the level they're at. And 7th density is the highest. At mid-level 6, they can still materialize a little bit. 7th density is all non-physical exclusively, or so we're told, and although it's still a plane of form, and then at the end of 7th, you're at the end of what they refer to as this octave of consciousness. And the Ra say, and one of the things that makes their story believable is that when asked what is beyond this octave, their answer has always been, we don't know. We have no way of experiencing that or connecting with that, because it's beyond this octave. This octave is a boundary, and only when we finish this octave will we be able to go to the next octave. They hypothesize that there are infinite numbers of octaves, and leave it at that. And so, what started this drive that resulted in this download was that sometime last spring or early summer, I'm not sure which. First, my friend Tom had an experience that he felt was somehow outside of this octave. He didn't know why. He felt like he had had an experience within what he referred to at the time as it seemed like an angelic realm, and it seemed like it was outside of what he understood as this octave or this framework set out by the Ra. And so I then started making inquiry about the Ra and why is it the Ra can't see beyond this octave, and the answer came back very quickly, and that was because they set up a framework that didn't allow them to do that. In other words, they set up a belief system that prevented them, that restricted them. You follow me?
Yep, I got you.
And so I said, well, if they did that, then that means we don't need to do that. And the answer was very, very affirmatively yes. And so shortly thereafter, I started hearing from a what was described as a counterpart of my own essence or beingness, coming from an octave of multiple levels beyond the one we're in now, and so I asked the same, how can this be happening? Well, because you're not limited by the framework that the Ra set up for themselves, and so I have communication with this consciousness, and so. The next thing that came along was I was awakened in the morning of October 8th, which was a Friday morning, as I recall, of 2021. And I was around 4:30 in the morning and instructed to make a drawing, get a pad and a pencil or paper, a pen, and write a drawing down. And so I did that, and it was just a few circles, and it was quite crude, but it looked. I don't know if you can see what I've got. Can you put on the screen what I've got?
Yeah, yes, I put it on screen for you.
No, what I've got in my hand. I've got something in my hand.
Oh yeah. Hold on a second. Let me get this off here.
Put me back on there. Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Go ahead.
Let's see if all right. Anyway, I wrote this. This was something I did later in the same day. And,
right.
But first it was just a yellow pad. I'm a lawyer. I have lots of yellow pads around. So I drew some circles on a paper with a few designations, and then later in the day I did something with a compass, and I created that, and then later on I got my older daughter to do this computer graphic thing that I've sent you, so you can put that on the screen now.
Okay.
All right, so this is what evolved after multiple discussions. But first, let's go to the other slide that you have there. Okay. I don't know whether, I hope this can be seen better by viewers than it can be seen on my screen here. But what this is this is a framework, or is the framework of reality that exists within the raw information, the law of one. And to my knowledge, this is as far as any framework that has ever been, at least that I've gotten access to, that's ever been downloaded to anybody on Earth, has covered. And the words on the outside are words that are names for what we would call God in most common parlance, and those names are words that we got from trial and error, and we had. Let's see, we tried any number of names, and these are in an ascending order of priority. In other words, the first one is the least important. The second one is the second least important, and so forth. And so we call it scrims because scrims was a word that came through channeling that sort of depicts the porous nature of the boundaries here. A scrim is a sort of a cheesecloth used in theater productions. You can shine light through it. It can be translucent. You can paint on it. It can be opaque also, and so it's something that has all sorts of qualities to it. But mind is the first and least significant of the terms. Brahman is the next one. Tao is the next one, and Brahman and Tao apparently are used because of the meanings that they convey. Brahman in Sanskrit and Tao in Chinese that are not easily translatable into English. All that is the next one, and the most prioritized, the most appropriate of all of them is I am / I am who I am what I am, or I am that I am, and so that name I am that I am is the most significant because it best describes the status of becoming. It also best describes the status of that this is a consciousness that is constantly evolving. And to give you an illustration here of what we went through, I've got a yellow pad with a list of yeses and a list of no's that are of words that are acceptable to describe this entity, or this whatever we should call it, and God, Yahweh, Allah. We got a strong no on all three of those.
Wow.
A very strong no. That's not even in the top. It's not in the top 20.
Wow.
And the reason, and also creator, we got a strong no on creator, even though it is a creator entity, a creator thing, but the reason we got no's on those, and this will take us into the next slide, is that what we got is that this that we call God, and which we would better call I am that I am, is not a being at all. It's a consciousness, but not a being as such. So all of our ideas about about a biblical God sitting on a throne with a long beard and a big staff in his hand or her hand. These are anthropomorphic illusions. They're not real at all. And so it was really interesting. But we we have a list of about 20 yeses, with the priority being the 5 that are listed on that sheet. But God, anything you put a name on that implies a being is a very definitive no. And so I pass that on. Names that were also were okay were source, singularity, love, truth, principle, spirit, great white spirit, light, infinite energy, logos, and so forth. But nothing that is most commonly used. And so, and I will tell you that I'll get to it in a few minutes, that it doesn't mean that you can't have a personal connection with this consciousness, but don't think of it as a being. It is not. Now let's move on to that next slide.
Okay.
This is now the reason this one. Is it possible to put the two side by side, Sandy?
I don't think so. I can only get this one up there. I wish I could.
All right. Well, anyway, what this one is a one that incorporates the one that we just looked at in multiples. And so if you look at this one, in the upper up near the top, well, let's hold on. Let me back up a minute. Let's back up to the other one for 1 second.
Okay.
I can't read it easily on my screen, but I hope that the people at home can. But what we have, what the language that's written inside the circle in the blue here, or violet, or whatever color it is, and this is just an inventory list of things that came through as part of this channeling, if you will. And these are just an inventory of all the things that we can think of that generally describe the categories of experience that fall within, let's say, the raw material, the law of one, and all that. Universes of creation, densities, octaves, dimensions, frequencies, forms, planes, spirits, souls, physical expression and manifestation, probabilities, parallels. In other words, all parallels of our universe would be incorporated within this concept. All parallel timelines, all parallel physical realities, evolving consciousness and beingness, all states and stages of consciousness. And so anything that we've ever heard of is within this framework. Are you with me there?
Yeah. So this is what they like to call themselves then, right there in the center of the circle.
Right. This is all the octaves and all the states and stages of consciousness and all the planes of Michael and any other group. They're all in here. All in here. Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now we can move to the other one. And what is in the other one? This one here is in each one of these small circles in the middle is another version of the one we were just looking at. You follow me?
Yes, I do.
Each one is a separate iteration of all that is.
That is really incredible. So
Each
each one
one
of those color ones is a different, like we were doing raw in the.
exactly. Each
Okay.
one is a separate iteration of all that is of creation itself. And each one has its own separate creator, I am that I am consciousness.
Wow, that's incredible. It
And
looks.
this is not, these are just, these were just all I could fill the space with. The number would be theoretically infinite, even though it
Wow.
probably isn't infinite in reality. But you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. It's
And
amazing.
these are not parallels of ours. They are just others. There was the laws of physics would be different in each one.
That is incredible. And this is what happened to you on October 8th, this download.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Now, all this, you see this next layer around all that. It says the joyful realm of infinite imagination,
Yes.
infinite illumination, infinite creation. All these things in the middle of that, including our version of all that is, are described as extrusions of this realm.
Okay, I get it. I see it.
Have you ever heard of extruded aluminum?
Yes.
Back about in the early 80s, I used to do a lot of sailing, and there was a wonderful boat that came out in the early 80s called the Freedom 40s, and it was a two-masted boat that had the masts were extruded aluminum where they were unstayed. There was
Mm-hmm.
a very flexible piece of aluminum,
Right.
and it was extruded like you would spin it out in a longevity wise, and that's what each of these realms is. That's what our realm, and so each one is totally unique, and each one represents some facet of the entire aspect of the realm above, the joyful realm of infinite imagination.
Are we playing in all those realms at the same time?
Well, me, I've always got questions, and so I said, how am I getting this? And I said, how is it that I'm getting something along these lines, and the Ra didn't get this? And
Okay.
and this is not part of the Pleiadian teaching either, or whatever. And what the answer was that and the Ra didn't get it because almost substantially all of the Ra are creatures of this creation, of this version of all that is. And they say that there's a small percentage of essences, or what they refer to as beingnesses. They in the course of this, they also say that our concept of soul is overstated, and what we need to know is that there's a concept they refer to as beingness that is much grander and greater than soul, which we would think of more as spirit than soul,
Mm-hmm.
which really is our true identity more so than soul. And that there are some that they say 98% plus, 98+% of all the beingnesses that animate beings, of sentient beings across the Milky Way are creatures of the current version of creation. But there are something under 2% that are beingnesses that predate this creation, that were around before this creation began. And therefore, they have access to memories of what came before. And that's how that's how this was, why this was allowed to be shared with me.
I see. So if we reference Michael Chamlings,
Right.
they talk about the older soul beings that are, that haven't dropped off the planet. There's one soul being group that's been dropped off and they're not on here anymore. But I think the second oldest one is still on this point, still playing around in this density, right?
Yeah, but this doesn't relate to soul age in any respect. This relates to the age of the being. In other words, the majority of all beingnesses in this creation and in every creation are beingnesses that are creatures of that creation. And then when this universe runs its course and all its parallels run their course, then all the beingnesses that have been created within this creation will then return to the realm of infinite imagination and become part of that. And some will elect, not all, but some will elect to go back and express themselves again in other creations. You see?
Yep. I understand that.
And so those which do include me and some others. And interestingly enough, what we're told is that the percentage across the Milky Way among sentient beings that are animated by this is less than 2%. But on Earth today, the percentage is 9.5% because of the situation that Earth is in and the need for the cavalry, if you will, to show up. And so these are what essentially the Ra call wanderers, and they're otherwise you might call them star seeds and so forth, and so they're not. Then that doesn't mean that if you're from another planet that you came here from a higher density and to help the evolution of Earth, that you necessarily were not a creature of this creation, but it seems to be more likely in the current context. And so that's what gives access to this. But the important part, much more important than that, is the fact that everyone on this planet and everywhere else is animated by what is referred to as this beingness aspect. And the way they analogize that is they say, if you imagine a concert violinist playing a Stradivarius in a concert, the violinist and the Stradivarius he's playing or she's playing, and the bow, which is, they have bows are just as rare. I mean, in some ways, just as much finery as the violin itself. All that plus the audience is the beingness. The soul is the sheet music that's being played. That's the comparison.
Nice.
So, and if you think of it as somebody who's a chef, a chef making a meal for somebody is the chef plus the meal plus the people that eat the meal and the appreciation they have. That's the beingness. The recipe is the soul.
Nice.
And so that gives you a flavor for the scope of the one versus the other. And that aspect of beingness has access at all times, even though it's not readily known, to this realm of infinite imagination. And what has been stressed in the context of that realm is that the most important aspect, the most important attribute, if you will, is joy, pure joy, and that realm is there. We've been given what's been referred to as 5 fundamentals of creation, and the first one is joy, and the most important one is joy. The second one is autonomy. That's from whence we get the concept of free will. The,
Mm-hmm.
the third one is appreciation. That's from whence we get concepts of devotion, worship, and so forth. Um, and it's appreciation and joy from whence we get the concept of love. It's a derivative of those two, but it's in a sense, watered down. The fourth one is what's referred to as geometry. It's like the way people connect is through geometry and so forth, and structure. And the fifth one is, interestingly enough, it's not sound, but it's music. Music. And what we have gotten through channeling various groups that have come to us from this realm of infinite imagination, one of which has referred to itself as the quintet. They don't want to be called the five. They say, no, we're not the five, we're the quintet, because when you use the term quintet, you understand it from a musical perspective. And so it's and one of the members of the quintet apparently was the animator of the poet 1,000 years ago we refer to as Rumi, probably one of the greatest poets that ever lived on earth.
I agree with that. So what is the ground of all being and the origin and the terra incognita?
Well, ground of all being is simply the ground from which the infinite imagination realm is drawn, and we have been and I was channeled the word origin and wrote down on my own accord terra incognita, because we didn't know about origin. Interestingly enough, we got a download on that there are immutable laws of principles of origin, and one is the first concept is that joy is immutable. Joy is immutable. The second one is creation is immutable. And the third one is expansion is immutable. So these are the three greatest principles of all: joy, expansion, and creation, and infinite supply from this, which are completely consistent with all the information we've gotten from the infinite realm of imagination. But so that's the framework. I want to say too that as a result of this framework, I think I had an experience that occurred the Friday before Thanksgiving in 2021, where I literally had, for the first time in my life, a direct experience, directly a physical and embodied experience of the energy of the consciousness of I am that I am. It was absolutely overwhelming. I was I was reduced to tears like a rag doll. But it was a message that I was to communicate this and share it, and told that we know you're shy about it, but one way you could do it is with hugs, because like few know that when two people hug each other, that it is I am that I am hugging itself, and so it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. I've had unity consciousness experiences. I've had experiences where I felt like I was in tune with everything that is and all that. This was somehow beyond all of that, and then within a short time thereafter, in another miraculous event, I encountered a woman who has become the love of my life in ways that I would not have been prepared to even accept if it had occurred before these expanded frameworks had been presented to me and been made real to me. So it's all miraculous from my perspective. I've been blessed with miracles throughout, and it's all just a big love story.
I love that. In fact, you actually wrote, we're a little over time, but that's okay because I want you to read what is love that
I'll do this, and this is, I think, quite appropriate to this whole situation, because what this expanded framework is about is a way to we actually have something to teach civilizations that are light years ahead of us in technology and in consciousness advancement, but they have been locked off from this information by their own limiting frameworks. And so anyway, this is something that I channeled 30 years ago this month, on January 11th, 1992, when I asked my guides for a simple and universally applicable statement about love in answer to my question, what is love? So I'll read it to you. I think it's appropriate as a way to end this discussion tonight. Most people think that love is good and that bad things like hate, fear, anger, envy, greed, deceit, etc., are the opposites of love or evidence of its absence. They are neither, however. The truth is, love has no opposite and is never absent. Love, like life itself, is simply all that is, nothing more, nothing less. Those chimeras some call love's opposites are only love's masks and mirrors to souls as yet unawakened to its true nature and their own. Each of love's supposed opposites can be defined, but who can define love? No one, because, like consciousness, love defines us. We do not define it. Love is the perfect unison within all apparent polarities and guides us in all we do and are, even as we least suspect it. Love enables us to recreate and relive past patterns and to relinquish and transcend those patterns when we are finally prepared to accept and embrace the fullness of the present. Love is at once ubiquitous and inescapable, and it nurtures and sustains us in infinite unseen ways that always exceed the wildest of our expectations, the clearest of our perceptions, the profoundest of our judgments. Love cannot and never will be captured by the words of any language we conjure or create to describe or limit it, even by calling it good. More intriguing, more compelling, and to some more baffling than the greatest detective story ever told, love at every moment offers at our fingertips clues of its imminent caress. Just as cosmologists have discovered the quintessential nature of time is translinear, the essence of love, once discovered, is transpolar and omnipresent. The more we knowingly experience love's seamless tapestry in our lives, the more wonderfully mysterious its intricate and elegant handiwork becomes. Love is, beneath all, the deepest mystery of who we are and all that is, and one we shall never fully unravel, no matter how much light the windows of our awareness may shed upon it. Hail to the mystery.
Oh, I love that. So beautiful. My heart's vibrating right now. Very,
Yeah.
very,
You
very
know,
thankful for
it's,
that.
it's been 30 years. I read that piece to myself, usually at least once a month. Most often, I read it aloud to myself, and I find it it's just as soothing to me now as it was when the first day it came through.
Well, I have much gratitude to you, fine sir, for sharing it with our listeners that listen to this show because it's absolutely beautiful. I got a question for you before you shove
Sure.
off for the evening, but what is one thing that you would say to everybody listening tonight about the energy about where we're going and what we need to do to help each other out to get through all this.
Well, in the context of what I was talking about tonight, I would say most everyone all the time is trying to do the best they can. It may not be doing right. They may be doing all kinds of things terribly wrong by most measures. But from the standpoint of having perspective on what's happening, if one realizes that, then that allows one to have a level of understanding and tolerance for the direction that humanity is going in that is not necessarily realizable if you're down in the weeds or arguing over the details of conservative versus liberal politics or whose religion is right or wrong and all those things. Everyone's trying to do the best they can. And the more we can expand our frameworks, the more we will understand that, and the more we will likely to evolve in a way that will preserve and allow the human experiment on Earth to be a success instead of a self-extinguishing failure.
Gotcha. Oh, very profound. And again, I just have much gratitude for tonight and learning from you as always, as I always do. And you are so gracious to share it with the listeners. In fact, one of them commented, "Is it possible to get a copy of your love letter you have written?"
Well, you mean the thing I just read? Well,
Yeah.
Isn't that on the screen? Can't that be downloaded by people?
Yeah. Do you have a place that they can download it? I can actually send her a copy. I know her personally, so I can send it to her.
I mean, I'm perfectly happy for anybody to have that.
Okay. Well,
So
any of you guys that want a copy of it, just hit me up. I'll send it to you by email.
It's not something that people can go on to and copy?
I don't think so. I have to send it to them, but I don't mind. I don't mind. If you don't mind me sharing it, I don't mind sharing it.
If you to share that, you share the rest of it as well.
Okay, I can definitely do that. I can. Anybody that wants it, they know how to get in touch with me.
Because what I have personally found, and it may be just me, but my guidance is to the effect that sharing this information is important, not only for people here, but for literally for beings from other planets. That having access to this expanded framework really opens up one's consciousness in ways that are profound in my experience so far, and it just we cannot always change the physical experiences we're having. As I've mentioned to you, when we were talking earlier today, 3 weeks ago, the office building where my law firm is located caught fire, and we've been shut at the office ever since, and we're supposed to get back this week. A week ago, I fell and had a pretty serious break, 3 fractures of my upper arm where it connects with the shoulder on the right side, which I'm right-handed. And today, as if that all were not enough, my heat pump went out, and it's supposed to go down to 11 or 12 degrees tonight. And so we can have all sorts of different physical experiences that are not necessarily those we would desire. Our attitude about those experiences makes a huge difference in the way that we receive them and the way they impact our lives. Within a few hours after my major fracture of my arm last weekend, I gave a lecture on this same subject to a group of people here in Richmond. At first, I didn't think I could do it, but I thought, no, I could go ahead and do that. And, this will just give me a level of intensity I didn't have with it before. And so, these frameworks allow us to expand our consciousness and expand our way of looking at things in ways that I have found to be totally beneficial and helpful in my own life, and I have no reason to believe they will not be helpful to others as well. So there you have it.
Wow. Amazing.
And by the way, this is not by any means the last word. It's just the last word we have right now.
Well, no, and I was going to ask you, like, you mind coming back on the show in like end of March or April, and let's see what's going on?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yeah.
I would love to. I mean, anything that comes up, let me know.
Mm-hmm.
So I can get you on here, because I love sharing this information with people, and if it can help one person, to me, that's saving humanity. Just one person, right?
Right.
So
yeah, I'm going to Columbia in February, and for among other things, an ayahuasca journey. So maybe I'll have something that comes from that.
I bet you will. You're going in February?
Well, the latter part of February, yeah.
Oh my gosh, you got to call me when you get back and tell me everything.
Yeah.
I got to hear. That's going to be quite a journey there.
I suspect it will be.
Yes, I know it will be. I know. Well, I'm so looking forward to that. Well, we've gone over. Thank you so much for being on here tonight. You're absolute pleasure every time.
My pleasure, Sandy, and look forward to doing it again sometime.
All right. Well, everyone, I want to thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibration Radio. And remember to keep the love flowing out there and helping our fellow human beings out there, because we're all one, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.